Welcome to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang, currently sheltering in place in San Francisco. Markets ending the day up, though oil seeing big declines. This as we wait a slew of corporate earnings this week, from Amazon to Apple to Alphabet. We are standing by, as usual, for the daily White House briefing. This briefing was initially canceled, but now it is back on. The White House today issuing a strategy to expand testing for the coronavirus across the United States. One official telling us they plan to release enough tests so all 50 states can screen at least 2% of their residents, though local officials remain skeptical. Joining me now from Amazon's home city is the mayor of Seattle, Jenny Durkan. Mayor Durkan, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, there's been so much going on in your city. We know that Seattle was one of the early epicenters of the coronavirus, but obviously some bold moves that the city took early on prevented seeing some of the more dismal numbers that we've seen elsewhere. Give us a status update. Where is your city in terms of cases, in terms of deaths, and in terms of the testing capacity?
So on the good news front first is, when we, at the height of the outbreak here, we had a transmission rate of about 3, which means for every person that got sick, they gave it to 3 more people. So we were seeing cases rise really quickly. We were able to do our measures pretty quickly, first by having the tech companies telecommute as well as the city and other large employers, and then do the stay-at-home order. As a result, today the transmission level is below 1, so every person that gets the virus is not even transmitting it to another person, which is really great. I think all of the epidemiologists are saying that's where you need to be for a significant period of time. The bad news is we still do see new infections and new people dying. And I think probably the worst news is we are nowhere near the testing capacity that we need in this city to really open up our economy in a meaningful way. So we've been working with the governor, talking to the federal authorities. We need more testing capacity on a significant level, and we're also going to need more contact tracing. What Mayor Bloomberg is doing in New York literally needs to happen in almost every major urban area and state if we want to get this right and really restart our economy.
Now, what is the testing capacity that you would like to see? If the White House is saying they'll release enough tests to test 2% of the residents in the state of Washington, is that enough? And do you believe they can actually get to that number?
So first, I'd like to see the plan for getting those testing capacity. It would be really helpful. We were for a period of weeks almost down to 0 in the city of Seattle on our ability to do tests. They were able to do it in hospital settings, and our first responders had test kits. But like the rest of the nation, for example, we are struggling in Washington state with our adult senior homes and the number of outbreaks. And we were pushing really hard in the city to get more people tested and then quarantined. And we did not have the capacity to do that. So I want to see that plan. I've retained a group of medical advisors, international and local, who are really helping us march through the benchmarks we need to reach if we want to reopen safely. We've got to reel the film back and remember the reason we're here is because we missed it. We missed the rise of the virus. And as a result, the only tool we had to stop it was to shut things down. We can't afford to do that again in America. So when we reopen, we have to have the testing capacity and the tracing capacity, or we could end up not just back where we were, but in a much worse place.
Now, on that note, I know it's not about us versus them, but in Seattle, you're looking at 750 deaths. In New York, you're looking at upwards of 22,000. What is it that Seattle did right that New York did wrong? I mean, there's been speculation that folks on the West Coast listen more to public health officials, where on the East Coast, they were listening too much to politicians.
So I just want to say that my heart breaks for New York. I've got so many friends who live in New York and have suffered through this really, really hard time. And so I hate to say that anyone did anything wrong. New York, particularly New York City, is such a condensed and dense urban area that they struggle with things that almost no other city does. But I do think I'll say what we did right. And I think that they also did right once they got down to it is we listened to our public health officials and our public health researchers, who are almost more important in this, because our public health officials were as blind as we were because we didn't have testing. And Seattle started taking steps to restrict people coming together before we had a single case known in Seattle, because our researchers were able to tell us by typing the genome of this virus how much it had spread in our community and how much we were missing. And then they told us what it would grow. And the estimates at the beginning, when we started this on March 1st, they believed that if we didn't take significant measures, that we would have over 70,000 positive viruses by mid-April. And so we knew that with that and the number of deaths, and that would overrun our hospital for sure. So working with the governor and the county executive, we decided we had to take significant action. So I give a lot of credit to the researchers here in Seattle who are fantastic, working with our public health officials, and to Governor Inslee and County Executive Dow Constantine and the other mayors. The politicians listened to the science, listened to healthcare workers, and then made the hard decisions, which are rightly policy decisions, but they've got to be grounded in science and in health.
You've been pretty frank about saying that you don't think the economy is anywhere close to being able to reopen safely. When does that happen? I mean, we're hearing companies in the Bay Area saying they're not going to let workers go back to work until September 1st. Could it be that long? And when do you expect to revise your own shelter-in-place guidelines?
So I think people have to think of it not as a light switch, but a dial. And I think it's a very long time before America's back at full strength and that Seattle's back at full strength. But we will be consciously reopening parts of our economy and working with businesses and then measuring it for a period of weeks to make sure that we don't see that rise in the virus that could overcome our healthcare system. And so it's going to be a balance between those two things. But I think that right now, what I'm saying to every business leader is get ready. Really be thinking through how are those steps and how is your operational rules and protocols going to change in a new world, in our new normal. How do you keep people in the workplace socially distanced? How do you have people telecommute as long as possible? How do you do a whole range of operational activities in a different way so that the virus isn't transmitted in the workplaces and then in the businesses? And so I think everyone is now going through that sector by sector. I think that the how it plays out in any workplace is a little bit different because, you know, a meat packing business is a very different operation than a high-tech company. And so each company and sector is going to have to really look at what's the best approach going forward. And then we as government have to try to facilitate that return to the economy and do our part through the testing and contact tracing. And that's where we're really going to rely on the federal government giving us the resources we need nationally. Because as you know, commerce flows intrastate, globally, and Seattle can't go it alone in Washington state, let alone in our country. We've got to do this cohesively together.
So let's speak about one of the high-tech businesses, and that is Amazon, a huge employer in Seattle, which has been getting a ton of attention, good and bad, for their role in this crisis. What have your conversations been like with Amazon over the last 6 weeks? Have they given you any indication of when they plan to return employees to headquarters? What is it that the city might need from Amazon or that Amazon might be needing from the city?
So I think it's Amazon, like all our employers, we've been talking to them. And I think that right now you're seeing a whole bunch of companies evaluate what a return to work looks like. I don't know if you saw it, for example, another business that's headquartered here is Zillow. And they recently announced that they're going to allow their employees to commute through the end of 2020. And so that's going to have significant implications for other workforces in and around Zillow, as well as for our commercial real estate market on the long term. How people reconfigure their workplaces is not just going to be through this year. I think you're going to see a lot of business reassessing how they do their operations. And so we've been having conversations with Amazon, with our small businesses, with a whole range of businesses, as well as a group here that consolidates called Challenge Seattle that has all our major businesses, to be thinking through how do we do it for big businesses and across sectors. We need from them them to be ready to move. When we give the public health guidelines, those will come from the Department of Health at the state level, probably augmented at the county level, to say, here's the things you're going to have to do generally, but then we're going to have to see specifically how do they play out in a business to keep people safe. A retail sales establishment, for example, is going to have a whole range of considerations that an online sales platform doesn't have. And so we really have to be thinking not just for today, but we have to be thinking long term, what is this going to do to the change in all of our businesses? And we're seeing that in the city of Seattle. We're going to, excuse me, we're going to have to move as many of our business lines online as we can in the coming months so that we reduce the number of contacts people have. Because this virus is still very dangerous. And it communicates by people coming together. And every time people come together, you have a chance of the virus growing again. So we still have to, in the long term, be thinking of ways that we keep people apart as we reopen this economy.
So give us a sense of what contact tracing looks like when the economy reopens in Seattle. How many tracers do you plan to hire? Do you plan to tap into some of the software that Apple and Google are developing on mobile phones? And are you at all concerned about the privacy implications of this?
So contact tracing in Washington state, well, the guidelines of it will be driven mostly at the state level, but then have county and maybe city specifics. And we're in those conversations right now. But I can give you an example. The first known case at the time of someone with coronavirus was in a city just north of Seattle. And our King County Public Health people, together with the Snohomish County Health people, did contact tracing. It's very labor intensive. Many people tracing through all the contacts that person has to see if other people contacted the virus. You need hundreds and thousands of people in states and cities to be able to do this and do it correctly. Because ideally what you want to have is, we want the virus to have been reduced enough so that it's safe for people to come together again. But we know the virus will transmit again because we're still seeing positive cases, even in this environment when there's shutdowns and shelter-in-place orders. So as people come together, you want to have enough testing that you find out that someone's sick. Then you have the contact tracer sit down with that person and literally find out everywhere they've been and everywhere they've come into contact with people for the previous 2 weeks. You can see that quickly explodes to a lot of work. And so I think it has to be a hybrid of both technology that helps people keep track of that in a smart way and just human beings doing that hard work of interviewing people. I don't think we will be at a place that we can roll out the apps like they have in South Korea or China or some other Asian countries where the privacy protections have some significant implications for us. I think there's too many issues around that we won't be able to resolve in time to get it done. And we need to be able to get it done rather quickly. So I think that we'll have a hybrid of that where there'll be the ability to have someone, ideally a contact tracer. Everybody would have the same form. They'd have a tablet in their hand. They'd sit down, they'd be able to enter it and upload it automatically. It would go to a database that could look at, for whether there's hotspots or connections, and that we could have the right public health response without invading people's privacy. So I think we have to get moving on it pretty quickly because if we don't do that and we miss it again, remember, the researchers believe that the majority of cases in Washington state came from a single transmission in January. That's just mind-blowing if you think about it. And so if we miss 1, 2, 5, or 10 of people who are infected who start infecting others, we'll suddenly be in the same place that New York found itself in or Italy. And we really, then if we shut down to our economy, there's more damage again. So we really have to be careful on reopening.
Right. And we certainly don't hope that does not happen, but it's been admirable the job Seattle has done. Jenny Durkan, Mayor of Seattle, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. We'll watch to see how the contact tracing plans come together. Meantime, coming up, we're going to be... Indeed. All right, well, thanks for sharing your time with us. Take care. All right, coming up, Lightspeed Venture Partners just raised $4 billion to invest in the tech economy. Where will they put that money to work as the world is changing by the minute? We'll speak with a partner. Coming up, also, we will take you to the daily White House briefing scheduled to start now at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time in about 15 minutes. When that begins, we'll take you there live. This is Bloomberg. Now, to investing in a crisis, Lightspeed Venture Partners just closed $4 billion to fund early and seed stage companies. Joining me now on the phone, Nicole Quinn, a partner at Lightspeed. Nicole, the world looks very different than what I believe you must have imagined it would look like as you were investing this money. The world changing now by the minute. How is that changing your strategy? How do you see now putting this money to work in the midst of a pandemic?
Hey, Emily. Thank you for having us on the show today. So you're absolutely right. We raised 3 funds, totaling just over $4 billion. And we're going to be investing across early stage growth and also global growth. We have 9 offices globally, and so that's something that we want to be thinking about from a global perspective. With regards to these times, Lightspeed's been around for 20 years. And so we have the insights to be able to share with our founders around when we went through this with 9/11, when we went through this around the financial crisis, and also going through this now. So we're lucky that we have a very stable group of LPs who have been with us through these times, and we're just making sure to continue to invest in generational change companies.
So talk to us about your thoughts on how much worse this gets before it gets better. We're seeing tech companies laying off employees day after day, struggling with furloughs, struggling with justifying some of the high valuations that they initially raised money at. How bad does it get for the tech economy, and how many more layoffs do we see?
So first and foremost, this is a health pandemic, and so we're certainly encouraging all of our companies to do the right thing with relation to people's health and safety. And then secondly, we're looking at this from the venture capital tech perspective, working closely with our companies around that. And most importantly, we're helping those companies ensure that they can get through this period. And so that means having the cash to get through it. I think that companies always have to be thinking about whether it's important that they play the offensive game or the defensive game. And right now, great companies like Calm have to be there for their customers, the meditation and sleep app. And so they're constantly thinking about the fact that we're in these times of anxiety and they need to be there for their customers. And so companies need to play both the offensive and defensive game, especially around cost cutting. And with that, I would say that, cost cutting, we're encouraging our companies to make sure they have at least 2 years runway. And so that does mean that they have to make tough decisions in these times.
So how are you advising companies navigate these tough decisions? So when it comes to layoffs, for example, do you think companies should cut more than they think they need to cut, or should they double down and try to win?
I think anytime there's a situation where layoffs are necessary, we're encouraging companies to do one round of layoffs or furloughs so that they can keep their health benefits. Doing multiple smaller cuts is really hard for the business and culture. So these companies are doing one cut now and then, when it's needed, and then assessing in a few months to see where we'll be. It's also important for our CEOs to be wartime leaders right now, to make these tough decisions, but also keep morale and culture strong. One good example is Henry Ward, who's CEO of Carter, a Lightspeed portfolio company, and he's done a really good job here. He actually recently published a blog post last week about how tough it was to let go of 16% of the workforce. So I'd encourage any CEO to read that. It's very helpful.
Now, there is a new report from Fenwick & West that said that the companies that are getting funded right now are more established, quote-unquote, startups. That means that early and seed stage companies may suffer through this, but that is, as far as I understand it, where your money is directed. Where do you see opportunities? What kind of sectors do you think thrive, and what areas of the economy don't thrive over the next several months?
Yeah, we are definitely continuing to invest. We're investing in disruptive technologies and founders who want to build these enduring companies with strong fundamentals. And so we are making sure to keep our eyes and ears open for those brilliant founders. I think it is a good time to be a founder. You know, there are some terrific companies that get created in downturns. We've seen a lot of interesting new opportunities emerge over this time, and the cost to build a startup has certainly been coming down. In terms of specific examples, on the enterprise side, you know, we're using these new collaboration technologies such as Zoom and Slack, and they're very much becoming mainstream. On the consumer side, people are staying home and they want healthy, nutritious food, so they're turning to companies like Daily Harvest. They're also using entertainment at home far more. And so the company Cameo is there for their customers to be able to offer video shout outs from folks like Snoop Dogg or Mandy Moore. And as I mentioned earlier, Calm are really there to help with anxiety. And I don't know if you're anything like me, but it's certainly hard to sleep at the moment. So Calm are there with their bedtime stories to help you.
Sleep is certainly an elusive thing right now. It feels like this is also a global opportunity fund. Where do you see putting this money to work regionally as some countries come back online faster than others?
Yeah, so we at Lightspeed have had the benefit over the years of working with our China, India, Europe teams. We actually have 9 offices globally. And so that helps us both be able to see how other countries are reacting to what's going on, and also thinking about where we want to invest. A lot of interesting trends, such as these, you know, new types of work collaboration technologies are emerging outside the US. And so we need to think about whether the UK or India or wherever else is most important. We also, at Lightspeed, 1/3 of our employees are female, and so we think it's super important to have that diversity of thought around the table, both from a geographic perspective, but also just, you know, different opinions and experiences that really help the best decisions be made, especially in these tough times.
Meantime, today, a whole new flood of money has been made available for small businesses. We know how quickly it evaporated last time around, and it seems the program is already overwhelmed. There's been a debate about whether venture capital-backed companies should be applying for this money. What's your position on this? Should VC-backed startups be applying for PPP loans?
We've been having a lot of deliberate conversations around this, and our view is that this is for mainstream, not for venture-backed companies. The companies where I'm on the board of have not taken PPP loans, but there are a small number of companies who are certainly thinking about that in our portfolio. On the whole, we have not been encouraging this, but I certainly think that we need to take everyone on a case-by-case scenario.
All right, Nicole Quinn, a partner at Lightspeed Venture Partners. Thank you so much, Nicole, for sharing your views with us. Meantime, I want to get to some breaking news. Walmart announcing they'll have 100 COVID testing sites up and running by the end of May. They've since been operating about 20 sites across 12 states, but they're trying to get that up to 100 by the end of next month, which they say will enable them to test 20,000 people a week. As you know, we're standing by for the White House briefing. Today, the White House unveiling a new plan to increase testing across the country. But again, lots of skepticism about whether the administration can meet that number. We heard from the Seattle mayor earlier. We're going to be taking you to the Rose Garden as soon as that briefing begins. We're also going to bring you a story about building ventilators from scratch. New York needed ventilators. There weren't enough. We'll talk to a company who built one in a month. No joke. That's coming up after this quick break. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. The ventilator has been used to treat the most critical of COVID patients, but it's been at the center of a supply chain storm. Not enough ventilators for the patients who need them. That led one New York-based accelerator to try to hack it. They were able to build a new ventilator in under a month, and it is now in operation across New York. Take a listen to my interview earlier with the head of New Lab, co-founder Scott Cohen.
We actually were called early on. I was, as well as Marcel, independent of one another by a friend in Amsterdam when Italy was under siege. He's Italian, and he asked both of us, independent of each other, we didn't know this, if we could help Italy. And with the kind of the community at New Lab, which is a technology and design center with about 700 engineers and entrepreneurs and frontier tech inventors. And both of us, independent of each other, looked it up, thought, looks difficult. But then as things started coming towards New York, I looked it up again online. I started seeing who was doing what. And I emailed Marcel and told him, hey, I'm thinking about maybe working on a ventilator. This MIT design looks kind of interesting. What do you think? And I also reached out to Charles Boyce in Long Island City. And all of us really agreed, let's give it a go.
You've managed to make a bridge ventilator, as I understand it. So this is a ventilator that if you're not in critical enough condition to need a standard ventilator, this machine is sort of a halfway step, but helps you breathe. How does it actually work?
Well, basically, most hospitals have a bag, a BV bag. It's called, most people know them as ambu bags. You'll see them in ambulances. If they need to pump air into a patient, they'll use this bag to pump air into a patient by hand. So if you think about what a human would do mechanically with their hands and are using our brains to kind of intuit how much air and how to treat the patient, we've basically built a robotic device that does that, but that also measures respiratory volume, inhale and exhale. And we've built in a circuit board that has sensors on it that can measure airflow. And so we've built essentially a robotic device that does a lot of what a ventilator does. But really, if you think about the higher end ventilators being used at the very beginning of someone in critical care and at the very end to wean them off, for all those other people in the middle that are just trying to stabilize them, this could serve that middle layer, which is a pretty big number.
Now, you got these into New York City hospitals last week. How many do you have out there in operation?
I don't know. We're delivering, we basically sold them to New York City. And so we're delivering to the EDC, and then they're working with all the public and private hospitals to place them in the hospitals. And so that's their own process. I know we trained about 24 physicians at Metropolitan Hospital. Our principal clinician, who's been advising us since the very beginning of this process, has been doing trainings in hospital. I know that Bellevue has received some, and that Montefiore, I believe, is receiving some this week.
Now, you've managed to cut down on cost, cut down on supply chain issues, and so you can make one of these for, as I understand it, like $3,300, whereas a standard ventilator is more like $30,000. And you've also got companies like Honeywell helping you supply some of the parts quickly. Talk to us about the process of actually putting the pieces together in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, with a lot of factories being closed down around the world, probably, I'd ask my team every single day during the heat of the moment when we were really at an intense inflection point, when the hospitals were under the gun, the doctors and the head of hospital health services saying, we may need these tomorrow. I was just looking for points of failure. And one of the points of failure really is in the supply chain. There were critical, like our motors were going to take too long from Asia to get built because factories were closed. But we found a factory in Rochester, New York, and they mobilized people in Rochester, New York to build motors for us. And with Honeywell, their entire supply chain for these sensors was pretty much frozen. There were a lot of people like, the Fords and the GEs ordering a lot of the sensors for what was going to come later. We wanted to be responsive now. And so we leveraged our network, our senators, CEOs of Honeywell in Asia and Europe to call the global CEO on a particular day. And I think he woke up to a flurry of emails saying, New York needs your help. And they mobilized for us. It was pretty awesome. Yeah.
These could be like a miracle in developing countries. I know that you've had requests from other governments, other cities. Where are the requests coming from? Where do you imagine these machines could now go around the world?
Yeah, I think the critical thing is what we're working on with our advising physicians is developing a device that has as much utility in a New York hospital as it does in a rural hospital in Ethiopia. And it's the same device for the same price, basically. Maybe we can get them a little bit cheaper when we start scaling. But if you think about a country like Ethiopia, there's 100 million people and the entire country has 400 ventilators. And so that's not a situation you really want to be in if a pandemic like this comes through there. So we're talking to what we recommend to other countries is there's a lot of entrepreneurs and people that want to do good and help make this happen, but we really do need to be engaged with the civic leaders and the health ministries to make sure these things get safely deployed and people get trained to make sure there's enough respiratory therapists that can manage them.
And you're licensing the design for free, right?
MIT is a pure open source. They're putting their data out there, and our device was inspired by a lot of the hard work done at MIT. We're running what I call a managed open source. We're not just going to put it out there. We want to make sure that we approve the manufacturers that are interested in building these. And there are certain parts of the tool right now, the device, that we are going to control, like the control system of the software. If those things were manipulated in the wrong way, that could be a dangerous device, and we're not going to let that happen.
So talk to us about what countries you're talking to, what other governments you're talking to.
We're talking to folks in Brazil and Mexico, Colombia, Ethiopia, Malaysia, South Africa, and looks like we're going to be talking to folks in India this week.
New Lab co-founder Scott Cohen there. Again, a ventilator built in under a month and approved by the FDA. Coming up, we'll have more of Bloomberg Technology after this quick break. We will also take you to the White House briefing in the Rose Garden as soon as it begins. The president said it would start 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, about 7 minutes late now. But when it begins, we will take you there. This is Bloomberg.
Waging a brave fight against the virus.
President Trump speaking at the podium now. Let's take a quick listen in.
To heal the sick and to gradually reopen our nation and to safely get our people back to work. They want to get back to work, and they want to get back to work soon. There's a hunger for getting our country back, and it's happening faster than people would think. Ensuring the health of our economy is vital to ensuring the health of our nation. These goals work in tandem. They work side by side. It's clear that our aggressive strategy to slow the spread has been working and is saving countless lives. For those who are infected, we've taken unprecedented action to ensure they have the highest level of care anywhere in the world. The federal government has built more than 11,000 extra beds, shipped or delivered hundreds of millions of pieces of personal protective equipment, as you know. In fact, some of the people here are going to be talking about it, some of our greatest executives, some of the greatest anywhere in the world, and distributed over 10,000 ventilators. And we now have, in a very short period of time, many have been delivered and hundreds of thousands are being built. And frankly, every governor has more ventilators right now than they know what to do with. They're actually shipping them to different locations, and we're shipping some to our allies and others throughout the world because we have ventilators. Like the job that they've done in getting this very complex piece of equipment built is actually incredible. You don't hear about ventilators anymore except in a positive way. We've launched the most ambitious testing effort, likewise, on Earth. The United States has now conducted more than 5.4 million tests, nearly double the number tested in any other country, more than twice as much as any other country. Think of that. Moments ago, I came from a meeting with some of our nation's largest retailers, including Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, and Kroger. We're joined by the leaders of those great companies, and we also have with us the leaders from the world's top medical diagnostics companies and suppliers, Thermo Fisher, LabCorp, Quest, U.S. Cotton, and the American Clinical Laboratory Association. These are great companies. These private sector leaders, along with others such as Roche, Abbott, Becton Dickinson, Hologic, and Cepheid, have been exceptional partners in an unprecedented drive to expand the state's capabilities and our country's capabilities. The job they've done has been incredible. The testing that's been developed and being developed right now has been truly an amazing thing. I want to thank Abbott Laboratories for the job they've done. I want to thank Roche, and in particular, those two have really stepped forward. Abbott with a 5-minute test that people can take, and in 5 minutes they know what the answer is. I'd like to ask, if I could, the executives of these great companies, and they have really helped us a lot over the last 45-day period. We're talking about a 45-day period when many of us met, and since then, what Walmart and the others have done has been nothing short of amazing. So I just want to ask them to come forward and say a few words about their company. Plus, they're going to make a big contribution to our country. Please, come forward, please. Thank you. Come on up. Thanks. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for all of you for being here today. And what we'd like to talk about is the progress we made. The last time we were here was March 13th, and we've made tremendous progress. And none of that progress could be made without the 47,000 people at Quest Diagnostics that are working around the clock on working up the test and running the test and delivering the results that we need. As far as results, we've made tremendous progress. We are currently at Quest Diagnostics testing about 50,000 tests per day. We've been pushed by the task force to bring up that number. By the end of May, we'll have 100,000 tests per day, about 3 million tests, and these are the molecular tests that we do today. We've also brought up serological testing. We started that this past week, and by the end of May, we'll be close to 250,000 a day, about 7,000 a month. So you put those two numbers together, it's about 10 million tests by the end of May that we'll be doing at Quest Diagnostics. We're doing that also in a quicker way. Turnaround times were somewhat of an issue. At the early days, we've reduced that to 1 to 2 days. Our turnaround time for people in beds, hospital beds, is less than 24 hours. And we're doing that in the same way we've done it with the FDA and with CLIA, delivering the quality that you all expect. And convenience will improve as well with convenient solutions that will be able to swab individuals more easily and also deliver to consumer the ability to have consumers choose a test online with a telehealth provider. So with that, I'd like to offer my colleague the podium as well.
Mr. President, thank you very much for your leadership and for having us all here today. Our scientists and our lab technicians are working day and night in order to do as many tests as we possibly can for the American public and to turn those tests around as quickly as possible. Just 45 days ago, we said we could do several thousand tests a day. We can now do 60,000 tests a day, and we're continuing to expand that capacity every single day. In addition, our scientists are working to make testing more convenient and easier. We have the swabs now that are much smaller than the original ones that we originally launched with, but we also have the Pixel by LabCorp at-home test. That test right now is for healthcare workers on the front line and first responders, but we will be rolling that out much more broadly over the coming weeks. And we're going to roll it out with absolutely no upfront cost for the individual consumers. At the same time, we are building our capacity for serology testing. And we can currently do about 50,000 today, and we'll be able to do several 100,000 per day by the middle of May. And we're going to be working with the retailers, our colleagues that are here today, to help them as they expand their testing capabilities across the entire country. And lastly, Mr. President, we have a rather large drug development business, and we will continue to work with our colleagues in the pharmaceutical and the biotechnology industry to ensure we do everything we possibly can to enroll clinical trials fast so that we can get new treatments and potential vaccines. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Mr. President, thank you, and thank the administration for all of their collaboration to enable Thermo Fisher Scientific to be able to produce the test kits that companies like LabCorp and Quest and the public health labs around the world run. We met our original commitments of producing 5 million kits a week, and we're up to scaling that to double that in the coming weeks in terms of supporting testing around the world. I'd like to thank my 75,000 colleagues around the world for their tireless effort to make that a reality and supporting all of our customers to have the testing necessary to get America back to work.
Thank you very much. Great job. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm John Nims with U.S. Cotton, and we are the company that is going to produce the swabs to be used in these testing kits. We have about 1,200 people in our company, and in our Cleveland operation, they have pivoted from, as you've said, the Q-tip style swab to a swab that's going to have a plastic stick with a polyester tip so that they can be assembled into these kits. Our Cleveland team has done a wonderful job with this, and they're very excited to be able to help in this effort. So thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much. Great job.
Mr. President, thank you. I'm Larry Marlowe with CVS Health, and it was just over a month ago that we opened up our first drive-through test site. And since that time, we have opened large-scale testing facilities across 5 states in partnership with the administration and working with the governors of Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Georgia, and Michigan. And these sites are enabling us to test approximately 1,000 individuals a day with real-time results. We now have a capacity to test about 35,000 individuals each week. And this afternoon, we announced plans to expand that capacity even further. Beginning in May, we will install testing capabilities in up to 1,000 CVS pharmacies. We'll be using our drive-thrus and our parking lots with swab testing. So again, you'll see that coming online in May. And we also recognize the fact that the virus is disproportionately affecting our minority communities. So we're working in partnership with organizations like the National Medical Association to bring testing and care into the traditionally underserved communities. We're also beginning to implement mobile capabilities with which to do that. And as businesses are restarting their workforce, we'll also be looking to assist them as they begin to come back to a normal operation. And finally, as my other colleagues, I just want to thank my CVS colleagues. They have done a phenomenal job in terms of helping people in many different ways, all across communities in the country. And they're part of this army of healthcare professionals and front store and first line supervisors and workers that are doing terrific things to bring our country together. And for that, we owe them a huge amount of gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate the invitation to be here today. And it was just 45 days ago when we were here. I'm Richard Ashworth. I oversee Walgreens in the U.S. And I just want to start off, Larry, like you, thanking the over 200,000 Walgreens team members who are in stores every day all across America taking care of our patients and our customers, giving them essential daily needs, the prescriptions, obviously, that they need, and even COVID testing while we're here. We also announced today we'll be expanding our testing capabilities across all states, including Puerto Rico. We'll be able to triple the volume that we do now in partnership with our lab partners, and we're excited to be able to do that. We're really excited with the public-private partnership that we have here because that's what enabling us to do this, and we look forward to working with the additional states to get these sites up and running as fast as possible. As a pharmacist, I just want to say one quick thing. I'm really proud to be part of this profession, and not just Walgreens pharmacists and pharmacy employees, but all of them across grocery, mass, independents. You're really doing what you should be doing and what you went to school for, to help patients, counseling them on their medicines and helping them understand the problems that we're facing. Pharmacy is right here in it with everyone together in the community, and we look forward to being part of the testing like we are now, serology, whatever that might look like in the future, and eventually treatment when the vaccine does come. So thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We appreciate all you're doing to get America back to work and doing it safely. I represent Kroger, and my name is Rodney McMullen. And I am so proud of our nearly 500,000 associates that are doing everything every day to keep customers safe and our associates safe. And one of the things that we were able to do is provide the basic practices we're doing. We call it Blueprint. And it's the things that all of us can learn from on how to get America back working. We also announced earlier today continuing to accelerate our practice on testing. We are actively engaged in 6 states. In the next couple of weeks, we'll take that to 12 states. And the number of tests that we do continues to grow faster than that. Together, we will win. Together, we will solve this problem and move on. America is always great. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Doug McMillan. I'm a Walmart associate, and I too would like to start by thanking our associates for everything that they're doing in our stores, Sam's Clubs, distribution centers, and in our e-commerce fulfillment centers. They've been inspiring and continue to have a can-do attitude and step up. It's much appreciated. We started 45 days ago, as did everyone else, and we've been operating sites for a while now. We're now up to 20 sites across 11 states. By the end of next week, we'll be to 45, and by the end of May, we'll be at 100. We also, a few weeks ago, Vice President Pence and I were in a distribution center in Virginia, a food distribution center. He was kind enough to come and thank our associates for us there, which is much appreciated. And the President and Vice President were speaking on the phone about surgical gowns, and the President asked if we could put in an order for millions of surgical gowns, and we don't normally buy those, so I wasn't sure if we were going to be able to do that. But I'd like to thank our apparel team and McKesson in particular for partnering with us. We've been able to, in the month of April, secure an additional 2.5 million surgical gowns. And by the end of May, we'll have an additional 6 million available to help. So thank you for the opportunity to serve and for being here.
Great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thanks to the team for getting this great operation up and running for the benefit of the country. I'm Hayward Donegan with Rite Aid, and we are currently operating 40% of the current test sites in 25 locations across 8 states.
We're listening to various retail company CEO talking about their testing efforts. We just heard from the CEO of Walmart, also the CEOs of CVS, LabCorp, Quest Diagnostic, outlining additional testing capacity that is coming in the United States. I want to bring in our Bloomberg government reporter, Emily Wilkins, who's been listening into this. Emily, we spoke to the Seattle mayor earlier in the show who said there were times when testing capacity in Seattle was basically zero. Now you have the president saying they're aiming to get to 2% capacity to test 2% of residents in any given state, and certainly they've got the cooperation of all of these different companies. But is this really achievable, especially given the challenges that they have faced so far?
I mean, at this point, we are seeing testing being scaled up. Remember, it was back in mid-March when President Trump first talked about having drive-through testing in Walmart, in CVS, in Walgreens. And right now, today, is when we're really starting to hear about it being ramped up. It did take a while to get into place. I mean, certainly this is something where many private groups, many public groups are trying to figure out how to up testing and how to increase it. And it seems like it's something that's just going to continue to take time to get to the point where most Americans are going to be able to be tested.
Meantime, Emily, we've got just about 30 seconds left. You're seeing some states like Florida and Ohio today taking steps toward easing restrictions, and yet again, the mayor of Seattle told us she doesn't think the economy is anywhere close to reopening. How does this play out?
I think there's a lot of gray area when you talk about reopening a state. What exactly does that mean? You know, in some states you're seeing them just say, okay, parks can open up, restaurants can open up, but at 25% capacity. I mean, some people see a full reopening of the economy as everything going back to normal. So I think what we're going to see through the next couple months is trying to get that incrementalism right. How far can we go to keep people healthy and safe, but also allow the economy to start up?
All right, Bloomberg Government's Emily Wilkins. You can continue to listen into that briefing on Live Go. More of Bloomberg Television after this quick break.